TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all around the world. I'm your friendly neighborhood philosopher, David Wood, and with me now is Tony Costa. Tony.
Hey David, how you doing? How you doing, David?
Good, good, good. I'm fine. I'm fine. Why don't you,
Great.
in case anyone wasn't here the last time you were on, doesn't know who you are, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right, I'm from Toronto, Canada. I'm a Christian apologist, and I'm also a pastor up here. And I teach at Toronto Baptist Seminary. Do some teaching with the University of Toronto as well in the area of biblical studies. And one of my specialties is Muslim-Christian relations. And so I have been involved in debates with many Muslims throughout the years in the United States and Canada, and continue to teach on Islam and continue to dialogue with Muslim friends.
And Tony, we're about to watch a clip. Just to be fair, we're going to watch an entire video of Shabir Ally. And how many times have you debated Shabir Ally, do you think? I don't know if you know the exact number.
I think it's been probably 10 plus. I'd say 11 or 12 debates I've had with him. So I've known him right from the beginning when he first came to Toronto and started his Islamic and Information Center. So he's from my side of town.
Yeah, notice everyone. I've debated Shabir Ally 9 times, so Tony had to say 10. Tony had to say 10 plus. 10 plus. Unlike David, who's only 9, he's single digits. I'm double digits.
You're getting there, David.
And Cheryl R said, "Hi, David. Watching the intro ad. Do you get ad revenue anymore?" Cheryl, that's a fluke. If you're seeing an ad, that is not going to be there for long. You come back and watch this afterwards. There's not going to be any ads. It's kind of there might be ads at the beginning of something like this because YouTube hasn't gotten enough info on it to shut down the ads. But yeah, give it a couple minutes. You're not getting any ads after that. All right, so. Tony, the Quran. Now you've been at this. When did you start doing apologetics dealing with Islam?
Around 1992.
Now that is interesting because, gosh, I wasn't even a Christian.
Right.
At that point. And what's interesting is a lot of people became interested in Islam after Islam became a big issue after the September 11th attacks. That's when lots of people became interested in Islam. So you were interested in it even well before that, and in a country where I can't imagine back then anyone being remotely interested in Islam. So what was it that made you think this was something you needed to be dealing with?
Well, I noticed that many Christians were beginning to look into Islam, and I noticed that when Shabir's Islamic Information Center started, they began to hand out tracts. They were basically doing the Christian thing, handing out tracts and evangelizing, or their term is dawah, doing dawah. And I just realized from the get-go that Islam was very dangerous. And I perceived that it was not just spiritually dangerous, but also politically dangerous in terms of the jihad, the doctrine of jihad. And so it was more out of a desire, because at that time I was involved in apologetics and cult evangelism, reaching out to people in the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, and so forth. And then as more and more Muslims came to Toronto, and Toronto is the most heavily populated city in Canada in terms of Muslim population, is Toronto and the greater Toronto area, I realized that Islam was a faith you got to know about it. It was a faith that you had to really understand, because they were using the same arguments that, for example, Jehovah's Witnesses would use against the Trinity, against the deity of Christ. They were basically watchtower arguments. And so what I realized, David, was there's something about the West, and it's just not just Canada. It's the same with America and same with the UK and so forth. The West is always enamored by new things, right? It's always the new and improved. It's the latest version of iPhone, the latest version of Samsung, and so forth. And of course, in the 60s, when all the gurus and the Eastern religions, Hinduism and Hare Krishna and transcendental meditation came to the Americas in the late 60s, there was a huge wave of Americans and Canadians and Westerners coming into these cults. And of course, there's the New Age movement. The New Age movement came out of that as well. And so I just realized that a lot of Canadians and Americans and Westerners just were enamored with Islam. It's something different, and it was about righteousness, doing good works, and Christianity they felt was somewhat passé. Christians weren't able to relate to their pastors, their churches, and so forth. And so I really started sounding the alarm, David. And I remember in the early 90s warning pastors about Islam and telling them to prepare. This is coming like a tidal wave. And so that's why I started, and that's why I continue in this field.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Here's a related question, because as you're talking about, you sort of realized and recognized the importance back then, but the churches as a whole, the Christian church as a whole, has still not recognized the significance. Right. And in fact, that's one of the main reasons I'm doing apologetics in this area. It's not because that's what I was interested in. At first, I was just studying because my best friend was a Muslim. After he was a Christian, I was thinking, cool, yeah. I'm done with Islam. I stayed in it because I realized you have this massive portion of the world's population, over a fifth of the world's population, believing this thing. And it's such a minor emphasis in apologetics. Almost everyone goes after atheism.
That's right.
And so, and you have this massive portion of the world's population, and back then there were only a couple. There's you in Canada. There's mm-hmm. Samuel Green in Australia,
right,
and a couple more for a
right.
population of 1.6 billion. And
right.
yeah, it occurred to me that we need to be focusing a little more. So I have a question here for you on that. I did put up a comment from Salgrad, who said, "God bless your apologetics empire." Yeah, quick update, everyone. I'll be posting a full update on my channel here in a couple of days, but had a Zoom meeting at 4:00 with Jorge and a tech team about putting together a website. For those of you who were leaving comments about doing the translations of the videos in multiple languages, I realize that there's a lot of people who would like to translate in the same language. So sometimes there's like 10 or 15 people who all say they want to make videos in one language. And there are people who say they're willing to cover all the main languages that I'm aware of that would be relevant. All kinds of European languages, all kinds of African languages, all kinds of Asian languages, and so on. So really, really awesome response. And it's perfectly fine if people want to do the translations on multiple channels, right? Like if one person says, no, I want to translate them in Urdu, and another person says, I want to translate them in Urdu as well. Guess what? That's fine, right? That's fine to have the content on multiple channels done by multiple people. But there are also situations where, if possible, if people could work together, that's going to be very helpful. In other words, if 3 or 4 people are working together and maybe one person's helping with editing and a couple people are translating and stuff like that, just makes things easier on everyone, because this is kind of a year-long project. But it's kind of hard to network and have a discussion in the chat section, because you don't want to be posting your email address and stuff like that there. So what we're going to do on the website, which is being built now, on the website, we're going to have a sort of password protected discussion room. And the discussion room we're going to arrange by language. So it'll be, English, it'll be Spanish, it'll be Urdu, it'll be Arabic, and so on, so that the people who are interested in doing translations and videos and so on for that language can get in that section of the forum and discuss if they'd like to network or if they just like to go solo. So anyway, we are on the ball on that, and there'll be more than that very shortly. But here's the question, Tony. Paul Bishop says, Tony and David, how can we educate churches about Islam? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's important that you try to get qualified speakers to come in. And if you just give them a book, most of your people probably won't even read it. They'll probably read the first chapter and drop it. So what I would recommend is try to get qualified speakers. You could always ask David or myself if you're in Canada. I know some others that might be able to come in as well. I think it's important to get a seminar going in the church. I've done this in some churches in Canada. where we held seminars, a weekend seminar just on Islam, everything you wanted to know about Islam, but were afraid to ask. And so I think it's important that you get some workshops going, get some seminars going, and then have your Sunday school teachers, adult Sunday school teachers, go through the material. And I think the definition of terms is very important here, because most Americans, most Canadian Christians, most in the West, most Western Christians think that Allah and the God of the Bible is the same. They'll just tell you Muslims worship the same God. The only difference is they don't believe Jesus is the Son of God, that he died on the cross, and that in the Trinity. And so I think it's important that we learn the language, because this is a different language. It's not the same. It's not Christianese. It's not Christian language. Islam has its own definition of terms for God, for Jesus, for the Holy Spirit, for the Bible, for the scriptures, for Gabriel, and so forth. So I think it's really important that if you take this serious enough, get a qualified speaker to come in, come and speak to your people, take questions and answers, and then take it from there. Take some good material, some good books like Norman Geisler's. I know that one was very helpful for you, Dave. It's probably the first book you read on answering Islam. And also, there's a lot of good books out there that you could read and follow up on. So you can always ask David or myself. We'd be more than happy to help. But remember, ignorance is one of the greatest plagues on the church, is not knowing why you believe what you believe. And so I think it's important to realize that we need to first understand what we believe before we reach out to our Muslim friends. And so, again, this is where apologetics plays a major role.
Yeah, and it's a sad situation, but I find a lot of people in the church don't become interested in Islam until one of their kids converts to Islam, and then suddenly, wow,
exactly,
we need to be aware of this. And guys, you should have been aware of it before that, right?
I see it all the time, David. There's a couple of folks that I was called in to come, and the parents were saying, please help my son, my daughter. They're going to become Muslim and so forth. And I've had the wonderful opportunity of meeting with these people right before they were ready to do Shahada. They were yanked out of the fire, and now they're serving the Lord and part of a faithful local church. But it's so true, David. I sometimes think I should join the U.S. Navy SEALs, because what they want is this emergency drop off where you go in and get the job done. Emergency drop off, get that person out of there and take them out. And unfortunately, some people wait till the very end when it's usually too late. But you're absolutely right, David. They simply ignore it until it happens on a personal level.
And for the record, I think we're a little too old to be thinking about becoming Navy SEALs, Tony.
I think you're right.
And as shredded as we are, I don't think we're shredded enough. Because I have a friend, Chad Williams, who's a Navy SEAL, and man, that's some rough training there.
It sure is.
All right, now here's a quick question from Zina Khalifa, who said, "How can I respond to a Muslim when they ask why would God even need a child? Why would He make Himself like creation?" Right. I'll go ahead and offer a quick response, and Tony can respond as well. Sure. Zina, this is this kinds of question. You have questions that are based on ignorance, and a lot of times in Islam, the question is the question which is based on ignorance, which is actually the ignorance of the founder of Islam, right? The founder of Islam heard Christians talking about the Son of God and would think something like God produced an offspring. Like God is, he's around one day and then he decides, I'm going to have an offspring. And so God has a child. That's not what we're talking about, right? That God didn't decide one day that he's going to produce an offspring. There's an eternal relationship between father and son. And Muslims actually have a sort of parallel, corrupt version of this, that Muslims believe that Allah has his eternal speech. Right? That Allah has this eternal speech, that eternally from Allah, his speech is sort of proceeding out of him, right? And that it exists eternally with him as a book, right? Now think, a human speaks out speech and puts it into a book. So just imagine saying, why does Allah need to do what humans do? Because that's what you're asking, right? You say, why would he make himself like creation, right? Well, why does Allah make himself like like creation, like how we make a book. Why does he make a book like that? He speaks it out and then puts it into a tablet and so on. Why is he doing that? Well, I think the Muslim will say, no, that's an eternal relationship. It's not that Allah decides one day to start speaking. It's that's an eternal relationship between Allah and His speech. And the familiarity that we have with writing a book, it's not that Allah decided to be like us. It's that we're doing something something that kind of resembles the relationship between Allah and His book. So when we talk about Jesus being the Word of God, or Jesus being the Son of God, we're not talking about God producing an offspring one day, like God, I'm really lonely. I need a son. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and produce a son. That's an eternal relationship. And what we have on earth with our relationships are sort of time-bound, sort of analogous situations, but it's not God copying us. That's again, that's based on ignorance, the ignorance of Muhammad when he heard Christians talking about the Son of God. It's more like there's an eternal relationship within the one God that for our sake is described as Father and Son, so that we can have some inkling of what the nature of God is like. But when God does this, when God condescends to tell us about His nature, you've got people like Muhammad who go, "What? I can't imagine God having a son. How could He do that? He don't even have a wife." Not what any Christian has ever meant. Not what any Christian has ever meant. What are your thoughts on this, Tony?
Yeah, exactly the same as yours, David. Because where the Quran says that when the Quran says that the Quran is in the mother of the book, the Kitab, well, if there's the mother of the book, well, who's the father of the book? I mean, we can play. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can play the same game. If the Quran is the mother of the book, then who's the father of the book? The Quran speaks of Ibn Sabil, a son of the road. What does that mean? Does the road produce sons? No, a son of the road is a traveler. So the Quran uses metaphorical language. And so when the Bible speaks of Jesus as the Son of God, it's not speaking of God procreating or sexually, biologically procreating a son like humans do. God has an eternal Son, as David rightly pointed out. The persons of the Trinity are eternal persons, and their relationships are eternal. And so in order for the Son to be eternally the Son, he has the eternal Father. And the eternal Father loves the eternal Son, and there's the eternal Spirit who brings that love in completion. And so the idea of the sonship of Jesus, the Son of God, means that he is eternally the Son of the Father. And we're not talking about time here. We're not talking about a temporal framework. And so you really need to ask the question, if Allah inspired the Quran, then Allah failed Christian theology. He'd get an F in Christian theology because Allah didn't even know what Christians believed. Think about that. Wouldn't Allah at least know what Christians believed? Wouldn't he know what the Nicene Creed means by Jesus being eternally begotten? So here's the problem. It's ignorance. You're back to Muhammad.
Yeah, there's actually, well, there's a couple of very important points in what Tony said there. Ladies and gentlemen, when the Quran is making fundamental mistakes, not just about what Christians believe, but about what Jews believe, right? Because the Quran also says that Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, and there's no record of any Jews saying that Ezra is the son of Allah. And the Quran gets Christian theology wrong. It thinks that Christians are talking about God having a physical offspring, and the Trinity being made up of Allah, Jesus, and Mary. And so Allah gets basic Christian theology wrong. And so notice, if the Quran is actually the result of Muhammad's thinking, well, I understand a 7th century illiterate Arab caravan robber misunderstanding what Christians are saying. I understand an illiterate 7th century Arabian caravan robber hearing Christians talk about the Father, and hearing Christians talk about Jesus the Son, and hearing Christians talk about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and thinking, oh, that's what they mean by the Trinity, even though that's not what we mean by the Trinity, right? I understand Muhammad making that mistake. If you're telling me that Allah made that mistake, that Allah got that wrong, then there are two possibilities. Either Allah knows what we believe, and he deliberately chose to misrepresent what we believe in order to attack it, in which case he's dishonest and immoral. Or he doesn't know what we believe, and that's why he got it wrong, in which case he's ignorant and therefore not all-knowing. So your God, Muslims, is either deceptive, or ignorant? Which one do you want to go with? I already know you want to go with this with deceptive because he brags about being the best of deceivers. So I'd stick with that one. The other important point that Anthony brought up is I'll go ahead and read a quick verse here. Surah 3, verse 7, Tony brought up you go by either, right? Tony or Anthony?
I go by three names, David: Antonio, Anthony, and Tony.
Oh, I'm going with Antonio.
You go.
So Antonio here says he mentions that according to the Quran, there's the mother of the books. And let me go ahead and read a couple translations at the beginning of Surah 3, verse 7 here. He it is who has revealed to you, Muhammad, the scripture wherein are clear revelations. They are the substance of the book. Notice what it says here, substance of the book. That's the Pickthall. Yusuf Ali says, he it is who has sent down to you the book. In it are verses basic or fundamental. That's the Yusuf Ali. The Hilali Khan, it is he who has sent down to you, Muhammad, the book, this Quran. In it are verses that are entirely clear. They are the foundations of the book. M.H. Shakir, he it is who has revealed the book to you. Some of its verses are decisive. They are the basis of the book. So this is being translated as basis, foundation, substance, and so on. Palmer gives the literal translation. He it is who has revealed to you the book, of which there are some verses that are decisive. They are the mother of the book. It's al-Kitab, right? Mother of the book. So according to the Quran, with Allah, there's the mother of the book. So the Quran, which is Allah's eternal speech, has a mother, and the mother of the book is with Allah. So notice there's Allah and the mother, and then the Quran, which is the offspring, because there's the mother of the book and then there's the book. So Allah does have a partner, Allah does have a companion, and you have a kind of Islamic trinity. You've got Allah and the mother and the offspring, the book. Now, why in the world would Allah need to have sex with the mother of the book in order to produce the Quran? Your Muslim's going to say, it's not what we mean. Right? That's not what we mean. We're not talking about God having sex with some mother of the book and producing the Quran as an offspring. It's not what we're talking about, right? Right. Right. Now you know how Christians feel, Muslims. Now you know how Christians feel when you say, why did God need to have a son? Why did he decide to have a son? All right. One more quick question here, and then we'll get into some video clips. Darth Vega said, hi, David. What's the plan if your YouTube channel gets banned? Can you live stream on BitChute? Is it even worth going to another platform that doesn't have the same level of viewers? Well, Darth Vega, I'll go ahead and go through the plans. One, I have a backup channel, which I'm building up, and after just like, I don't know what it's been, 2 weeks or something like that, I have something like 25,000 subscribers on it. So I'm putting together a backup channel. If they go after my channel and my backup channel, I have lots of friends on YouTube who will be happy because I know when I was banned for a week, a bunch of people contacted me and said, hey, you can post on my channel if you're banned. And so I can keep cranking out content, but as far as this upcoming year-long project of getting 50 videos translated into multiple languages, that's kind of the basis, right? Now it's just silly because you've got these keyboard jihadis and they think we're going to go after David, not realizing, hey, I'm just happy to mind my own business and make videos on my channel. When you come after me, I start thinking, okay, maybe my time is limited and maybe I need to work really quickly in doing really awesome things. And so I think, okay, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get me kicked off the platform? Well, how do I make it so that all the material is there on the platform and you can't stop it? Well, that would be put out a nice series of videos with the time I've got and have them translated into 20, 30, 40 languages, right? So that's why we're working on that. And guys, I want to say, if we actually, I don't think YouTube could stop. They could stop that if they like made this giant plot, but I don't think we're that important for YouTube to do. Whatever happens, even if I got banned tomorrow, I would just release those videos on someone else's channel and would make sure they're available on the website so that people can translate them, put them into other languages and so on. So that looks like it's going forward no matter what they do to me. And if we end up getting over this next year a complete series of videos dealing with all of the main issues on Islam-focused Christian apologetics, we cover all the bases and those are translated into 20, 30, 40 languages, I don't care too much if you ban me after that, right? I don't care too much because guess what? Because you can't stop it then. You can't stop it. It's going to be self-sustaining process there with people learning and then other people carrying the information out and so on. So those are my thoughts. You have any thoughts on social media censorship and so on, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually quite surprised, David, that they banned you for a week when all you talked about was Christian persecution, and it just goes to show that there's nefarious forces at work here that certainly don't want to highlight the reality of Christian persecution. And so I'm not too much of a social tech kind of guy, but I think that you've got the wherewithal, you've got the brains. You're a survivor, David. You're a fighter. And I think that what you're doing in planning that backup, I think that's the wisest thing you can do right now.
Yeah.
But the truth will prevail one way or the other. The truth will prevail. The left is beginning to cannibalize itself, as you could probably see. But I think that in the end, I think the truth is going to prevail one way or the other.
Yeah, and it is really, really. It is really wild. Of all the videos, of all the 1,000+ videos I put out there, the one they go, it's like the tamest video I've ever. It's in the top 1% of the. It's in the top 10 nicest videos gentlest videos I've ever made.
Yeah.
Just reading some facts.
How do you argue with Open Doors?
Yeah.
I mean, Open Doors. They've got a watch list on the most persecuted Christian countries in the world. So it was incredible.
Yep. All right. Well, we ready to go into some video clips?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to once again look into the claim of Muslim apologists that the Quran has been perfectly preserved. Now, Tony, you've been interacting with Muslims for many years, apart from people like Shabir and Yasser Qadi, who are acknowledging that there are differences in the Quran. The Muslims you've run into over the years, what do they believe about the preservation of the Quran? What would they tell you, and what do they tell people that they're doing dawah to?
Well, most of them that I have met would say the same old mantra that the Quran has been preserved, every letter, every vowel, every consonant, every vowel point, every diacritical point, that's all been preserved since the time of Muhammad. The only one Muslim that was actually frank enough to admit to me was Shabir Ally. Before our second debate, we did our second debate, I think it was 1994, and it was on, is the Quran the Word of God? And in personal correspondence with Shabir, I said, Shabir, there are variants in the Quran. There's textual variants. And he actually admitted to me that he was aware of them. And he said, well, yeah, they're like the variants in the New Testament, like the longer ending of Mark, or the woman caught in adultery, the adultery pericope, as it's called. And I said, wow. I said, so you acknowledge there are variants? He said, yeah, but they don't affect the overall teaching or the overall practice of Islam and so forth. But what was happening on the debate stage was very different. It was the same old. But I knew from the beginning, David, that Shabir was aware of these variants. It's just that he never addressed them until now. And so I'm actually glad he's doing that. I think that the internet has advanced, and now there's no way to hide. I mean, Western scholarship has pinned them to the wall. Yep. And as Yasser Qadi admits, it was Yale. It was actually Yale University that really got him to rethink the whole issue about the Quran and the composition of the Quran. So, David, as you know, with the internet now, there's no more hiding. You can go online, you could read the Hadith, you could read the Sirah, you could read Al-Tirmidhi, the Tafsir, and so forth. And so what Shabir is saying now is what he told me way back, 30 years ago. But only now, I think he's now realizing this is out, the cat is out of the bag. And so we really got to address this.
And it's it's sad that we have to do this, because basically for 14 centuries you've had Muslim leaders raise Muslims to believe whatever they say to them unquestioningly, and that's just what happened in Islam. And they've operated on what I call the 99-1 rule, where if you're speaking to 100 people and 99 99 out of 100 are going to mindlessly believe whatever you say, and only one person is going to raise his hand and challenge it, guess what? You win, because the 99 can silence the one, especially in an environment where they can just chop his head off and say, you unbeliever. So Islam has operated on this for centuries, where up until the rise of the internet, I mean, keep in mind, where are Muslims learning about Islam? They're learning about Islam from their Muslim leaders, from their sheikhs, from their imams, from their apologists. Are you going to listen to Tony Costa tell you about Islam? No, he's an unbeliever. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's a liar and a deceiver, right? And so when we were telling Muslims, no, your Quran hasn't been perfectly preserved. If you look at your sources, the book most certainly has not been perfectly preserved. Even if you go to your own sources, they talk about entire chapters of the Quran coming up missing because Muslims were too lazy to recite them. They talk about large passages coming up missing because the only people who had them memorized died in battle. They talk about verses coming up missing because Aisha was the only one who had a copy of the verses, and then a sheep came in and ate the verses. And so these are the things you read about in the Muslim sources, and Muslims are trained to say perfect preservation right down to the letter. And so whether you look at what the Muslim sources say, or you look at the manuscript tradition, especially what we're going to be watching from Shabir Ally, where he talks about the Sanaa Manuscripts, you see perfect preservation is just absolutely ridiculous, and yet Muslims have to say it. And it's only now where they're forced to acknowledge it. Because Shabir, as Tony pointed out, Shabir was aware of it, but you just can't go around saying that if every single Muslim is going to call you a heretic for saying it. And I have all the respect in the world for Shabir for coming out now, even when these guys like Yasser Qadhi and Shabir Ally are forced to come forward and admit this, because they recognize we can't just keep saying perfect preservation right down to the letter when everyone across the board is quoting our sources, showing that there were changes, putting up manuscripts. There are books. You can get entire books now on differences in the manuscripts and so on. And so they're realizing we can't keep saying it. And so Shabir and Yasser Qadhi, these guys are the pioneers as far as being Muslim apologists and Muslim scholars who are informing the Muslim community, guys, we need to stop this nonsense. We need to stop this nonsense. Now, sadly, I'm not even looking at the comments, but there are probably Muslims who, nope, perfect preservation right down to the letter. And we're gonna watch a couple of videos by your scholars. All right, Tony, should we check out some of these videos?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we'll start with the shorter one. This video is was actually some clips put together by Islam Critiqued. So Islam Critiqued put these clips together of Yasser Qadhi. Looks like he was in a live stream with Muhammad Hijab. Remember Muhammad Hijab? Allah praise for Muhammad, not to Muhammad. Get it right. It's for Muhammad. Allah praise for Muhammad, not to Muhammad, everyone. That's Muhammad Hijab. Looks like he was interviewing Sheikh Yasser Qadhi. And Yasser Qadhi is talking about a problem that Muslims have. All right, let's see if we can check some of this out.
Every single student of knowledge knows, who studies Ulum al-Quran, that the most difficult topics are ahruf and qira'at, and the concept of ahruf and the reality of ahruf, and the relationship of the Uthmanic Mus'haf with the ahruf, and the preservation of the ahruf. Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 7? And the relationship of the qira'at to the ahruf. This is a topic that when you're the beginning student of knowledge, you're like, what is all of this going on here? When you go a little bit more, you learn to simply memorize what your teachers say and regurgitate it out. And you don't fully comprehend. When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. And this isn't new. This is from the time of the Sahaba. This is not a joke, brothers and sisters. The issue of ahruf and qira'at caused confusion to somebody whom the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to listen to the Quran directly, listen to Ubay. Ubay is not some even average Sahabi. He is the Qari of the Quran. He is the master. He is who he is. And he goes, فَدَخَلْ فِي نَفْسِي شَكْ. Like, what is all of this stuff? Again, this is you have asked me some very honest.
I'm going to pause it there. We might rewatch this, or we might rewatch that part. But I really, really like how Yasser Qadhi broke that part down, where he said, if you're a Muslim and you hear this stuff about the the ahruf and the kirat and so on, and you just don't know, and so kirat, those are those are sort of physical copies of the Quran. And the ahruf, it's interesting because Muslims don't know what in the world the ahruf are. We watched in my last live stream with Hatun Tash, we talked a bit about the ahruf, and Shabir was pointing out that ahruf means letters, or it can mean edges, and we just don't know what that means, what that's referring to. And one suggestion is that it refers to dialects. When those of us who have looked into the Muslim sources on this, we know it can't mean dialects, because even people who spoke the same dialects were reciting different versions of Quran verses. And so it's just massively confusing. The history of the Quran somehow hinges on what these different versions of the Quran are, and Muslims don't even know what they are. And so why I liked how Yasser Qadi broke that down. He said, if you don't know anything about this and you're Muslim and you hear, the Qiraat and the Haruf, and you go, what is all this? He goes, then if you investigate a little bit, so if you investigate it superficially, and you start, asking questions, then all you do is you learn what your Muslim apologists tell you. You learn what your imam tells you. And he's going to tell you, nope, the ahruf are just these different dialects and so on, and it's no problem at all. Or I'll say it's just differences in pronunciation. There are Muslims in the comment section who tell us, nope, it's just talking about differences in pronunciation and so on like that. And then he says, if you actually dig deep down to the scholarly level, you find out we got a problem here. And notice what Qadi says, this is no joke. This is no joke. And the reason he's saying it's no joke, I mean, one, this is the Quran, right? This is the book that's supposed to be clear, and they've got all these different versions, and they can't figure out, they don't even know what these ahruf, where the Quran is revealed in these 7 different ways, or whatever you want to call it, letters. They don't even know what that means. And they have all these different disagreements. And yet this is the foundation of the study of their book. And he's saying, we got a problem here. And notice, Tony, if they had that problem and they just acknowledged it as a problem, and they said, yeah, we've got different versions of the Quran. Depending on where you go in the world, they use different Qurans. It's the same basic meaning. And we believe that this is basically what goes back to Muhammad. I actually wouldn't have a huge problem with that. If Shabir's view of the history of the Quran, which we saw last time, is the Quran was revealed in multiple dialects, and there were people who just kind of memorized the gist, but not necessarily the exact wording. And so you ended up with people who are recording the Quran, but not word by word. They're just kind of getting the gist. And so you end up with these disputes over the Quran. And even then, when they finally recorded it, they didn't use the diacritical marks. And so the words can actually mean different things. And he says, this is how we ended up with all these different versions of the Quran. I actually wouldn't have a tremendous problem with that if that's what Muslims said is their view of how the Quran was produced. But right. The problem is, every Muslim apologist I've run into, up until Shabir and Yasser Qadi started saying these things, has insisted perfect preservation right down to the letter from the time it was revealed to Muhammad. And what your scholars are saying now totally contradicts that. And so now the bigger question for me is, why is Islam built upon a foundation of lies, right? Why do you use arguments that your leaders... See, here's the thing, guys. Your leaders who actually know the Muslim sources, and they've studied this and they went to school for this, they know about this stuff. They know about the different versions of the Quran. They know the history of the Quran and that chapters came up missing. They know this stuff. And they lie to you and tell you perfect preservation right down to the letter to give you this false confidence in your book. And I'm sitting there going, how do you ever trust those people again once you realize that they've been lying to you all along? And for some reason, Muslims can look at the evidence right in their faces and go, no problem whatsoever. We'll just move on, and we'll continue believing in the people who've been lying to us, and we know they've been lying to us our entire lives. What are your thoughts on all of this and Yasser Qadi's comments so far?
Yeah, I think, David, I've heard that as well. The ahruf, some of them will call it 7 readings. The Quran was revealed in 7 readings and so forth. But the major problem with this is that Uthman, why would Uthman, and I brought this up with my debate with Shabir back, I think in 94, why would Uthman have to standardize the Quran if the Quran was perfectly preserved? The standardization of the Quran implies that there's something wrong with the textual corpus, the textual structure of the Quran. And you've got you have a caliph here who actually burned other manuscripts. I mean, we'll hear about that. Shabir's explanation of that, I think, is quite funny. But the idea here is what's the need to burn all these other copies of the Quran? Ibn Masud refused to hand over his copy of the Quran, and it was taken by force. And then later, Al-Hajjaj comes along and says, I hate Ibn Masud. I would have killed him with my bare hands, and I would have scraped off his copy of the Quran with a bone of a pig and so forth. That is not talking about difference in readings. You're talking about a textual consonantal difference in the text. This is something that's been acknowledged by Western scholars. 90 years ago, Arthur Jeffrey of Columbia University put out an amazing book called his Materials for the History of the Text of the Quran, where he tabulates all of these variants. And this was in the 1930s. And so I think what it is, David, I think you will agree with me that the whole thing about the kirat and the ahruf, this is simply smoke and mirrors. It's simply a way to get around the reality that they actually destroyed competing texts of the Quran. Now, you only destroy manuscripts or documents or shred them if you're trying to hide something. And so that is never answered, is if the Quran has always been perfectly preserved, then there was no need to standardize it, either under Uthman, under Al-Hajjaj, and then in 1924 in Cairo, when they made the Hafs edition of the Quran, the standard edition of 1924, why did they have to flood all the other or drown the other Quran manuscripts into the Nile River? Again, you notice it's the same thing. Al-Hajjaj did it. Uthman did it. The Cairo scholars did it. Why did they do it in Cairo 1924? Because they saw that there was differences in the Qurans. The Warsh did not agree with the Hafs, and so on and so forth. So I think really what Dr. Yasser Qadi said there, and I respect him for this tremendously, is that we talk about all these words, ahruf and kirat, but when we dig deep, like he said, when we plunge deep into this topic, we begin to see that is not what happened. That's definitely not what happened.
Yeah, and so Shabir's explanation, see, you have a couple of things. One, you can deny the facts and deny reality, and if you do that, then you don't have to really come up with an explanation. But once you acknowledge the facts, then you need an explanation of the facts. And so if we have facts like, hey, Uthman had to gather all the Qurans together and burn them, and Ibn Masud, one of Muhammad's top 4 reciters of the Quran, was telling his followers, don't hand over your Qurans to be burned by this guy, hide them. He didn't trust this Quran. He didn't trust the new Quran being put out by Uthman. And so notice, if we had anything like that in Christianity, if we had anything like the Council of Nicaea gathering all the Bibles together, burning them, and then putting out official versions, Muslims would be shouting this from the rooftops. You see the deception. You see how they're covering things up. Fortunately, no Christian has ever been in that position. No Christian has ever been in a position to universally corrupt the scripture. You could corrupt your copy of the Bible or the Bibles in your area if you decided to change some things, but that's not going to change the copies in other parts of the world. So no Christian has ever been in that position. In Islam, they did have that opportunity where you had a central leader in an area where Islam was still under the control of that central leader. And what did that central leader do? He said, everyone hand over your copies of the Quran because I'm burning them all and I'm sending out my official version. And as Tony pointed out, there's no reason to do that if all these manuscripts line up. They all say the same thing. If they're all the same, right down to the letter, right down to the diacritical marks, which they didn't even have. There's no point in doing that. And so at least Shabir is trying to deal with the facts. His explanation is that the people who had these other Qurans were simply, they had recorded the gist, right? So instead of actually memorizing the verse word for word, they've gotten the main point, right? They got the main point and wrote that down, but then they thought that's the Quran. And then so Uthman recognizes, wait, we put up with that for a while, people writing their own versions of the Quran in their own words, but now we have to burn all of those. That doesn't really fit the facts because, as we know, it's not just, people who'd gotten the gist. It's people like Ibn Masud. It's people like Ibn Masud. Yeah. Muhammad said, if you want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from that guy. And Ibn Masud says, I do not trust this new Quran that you guys are coming up with. Do not hand your Qurans over to these people to destroy them. And so guys, Muslims, you got some problems here. You got some problems. And this is you have no one but your leaders and your scholars and your apologists to blame. I guess you could blame yourselves for being gullible and not listening to us when we were telling and not doing some investigating on your own. But you can blame yourselves and you can blame your scholars. Whatever you do, do not blame us, and don't blame Shabir, and don't blame Yasser Qadi for telling you the truth about what's in your sources, right? What's absolutely insane about this religion is who are the Muslim community going to blame? They're going to get mad at Shabir Ally. They're going to get mad at Yasser Qadi. They're going to get mad at people like us. They're going to get mad at Hatun. They're going to get mad at Jay Smith. They're going to get mad at everyone who's telling them the truth, and not get mad at the people who are responsible for the lies. Amazing stuff. All right, should we go forward with some more of this clip?
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you more of Sheikh Yasser Qadi.
It's the first time I'm saying these things. Many people are aware who listen to my lectures that I've mentioned the crises that happened to me at Yale. This was the issue. That the issue of ahruf and preservation and qira'at and relationships between them, these are very, very difficult issues. And the most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. Here's the point. These issues should only be discussed amongst people who know what the qira'at are and who understand some of these questions that are being raised.
So is what you're saying the shak that came, or not the shak, but the crisis that you had was in relation to this question of the relationship between the ahruf and the qira'at, basically?
No. The crisis I had wasn't that. The crisis I had was, that was what generated. But what was the crisis? The crisis was very simple. Traditional understandings of ahruf and qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by our people outside of, by their academics outside of the faith tradition. You see, in a Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have for the Quran. We should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new. They'll bring you riwayat, and they'll bring you athar, and then you add.
I want to pause that there because one, he's saying something really, really awesome and really important there, and then I didn't like what he said a little bit earlier. Once he acknowledge that, at first you hear about this stuff and you don't know what you're talking about, and then you study it a little bit, and you just accept the answers of your Muslim leaders and apologists and so on. But then if you dig deeply, you find out we've got some serious, serious problems here. And he specifically said, this is no joke. This is no joke, right? Mm-hmm. So he's acknowledging that, that there is this problem of they just don't know what to do with these different versions and how they relate to this or that. They just don't know. But then he says, the thing he said that I didn't like is this discussion should only be had amongst people who know what they're talking about. So it seems he's still trying. I mean, on the one hand, he's talking to Muslims who are going to be watching this online, and so maybe that's why he's reluctant to share the issues. He says, I could talk about this stuff, but I don't want to. So maybe he's. I just don't know. He's saying we need. It's almost like he's saying we need to keep this information from Muslims, and only have this discussion amongst scholars so that Muslims don't know about it. In which case, that's where the problem comes from, keeping Muslims in a state of ignorance. On the other hand, he's acknowledging that there are these problems and he's sharing this in public. So I'm not sure what to make of it there. But he did make the very, very cool point about scholars basically calling Muslims to task, Western scholars. He said, we Muslims, we respect the Quran. And so when we start to recognize that there's a problem, we push a little bit, we dig a little bit, and then we hear a response and we go, oh, that's enough for us. And he goes, you come to the Western scholars and they don't say that's enough. They start bringing up the problems with that answer. And then you realize, wait a minute, we don't have a good answer for that problem. And so we accepted it. We thought we were okay. And these guys keep pushing, and it's not. It's just not working. So he's saying we got a problem here. But notice Muslims, it's not within the Muslim world that these issues are brought into the light so that Muslims can look through them and make decisions. It has to come from without. It has to come from outside of Islam. The challenges have to come from outside of Islam, because within Islam, people will just lie to each other and comfort each other and notice, this goes back to the companions of Muhammad themselves. Uthman burns all the manuscripts in order to pretend that you don't have these differences. And that tradition has carried on until this day, that a comforting lie is better than a discomforting truth. Right? And that's how things are in Islam. And now you've got Yasser Qadhi and Shabir Ally, and they're sharing some discomforting truths, and we're going to be doing that as well. Tony, what do you think on all this stuff?
Yeah, I think that he made a very good point that the sources that Western scholars are using are their sources. We're using the Hadith, the most reliable sources of Islam, like Bukhari and Muslim and Sunnah Abu Dawud and others. And it's interesting, isn't it, David, that when you do your various segments on your YouTube channel, and you go to the sources and you quote how the way Muhammad died is exactly the way Allah said he would destroy him if he were to manipulate, pervert his message, he would take his life and he would tear his aorta from him. And then that's exactly what you find in the Hadith. Well, Muslims get mad at you for that, but it's in their sources. So you're not creating anything out of whole cloth. You're simply going back to the sources that were written long before you or I were born, written before many Muslims were born. And so when Western scholars are doing what they're doing is simply taking your own sources, just like they've done with the Bible. So for the past 400 years, the Bible has been the most scrutinized book. We call this higher criticism. And so the Old Testament was attacked, the New Testament was attacked, and lo and behold, the Church of Jesus Christ is still here. Christianity still exists. Jesus Christ is still changing lives. But when it comes to Islam, you will notice, David, and this is why I'm bringing this up, is that I just got a couple of New Testaments here. If I can just share this, David, before we move on.
Absolutely.
Here I have the Greek New Testament. This is the majority text.
You need to put that kind of in front of your face. There you go.
Oh, in front of my face.
Like
I'm sorry, like this?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the majority text, the Greek New Testament majority text, Hodges and Farstead. And you'll notice that in here, you've got the Greek New Testament. And at the bottom, you'll notice there's what's called an apparatus. So it'll point out if there's any textual variants and so forth. Here I have the Greek New Testament, the United Bible Societies, edited by Bruce Metzger and others. And the same thing, you'll notice there's the Greek text on top, and at the bottom, you'll notice an apparatus talking about various manuscripts, and this reading appears here, this reading is absent in this manuscript. And then we have Nessel 28, Nessel Allen 28, NA 28, the Greek New Testament. Same thing again, I open it up, and lo and behold, you have the Greek text, and at the bottom, you've got an apparatus. And then finally, this just came out about a year or so ago, the Greek New Testament, published by Tyndale House. And in this Greek New Testament, you will notice that you have the Greek text, and at the bottom, you have an apparatus. Now, the question our Muslim friends have to ask themselves is, why is it in 1400 years we have yet to see one critical apparatus of the Quran? One, just one. There isn't one. And the reason for that is because of what David and I are discussing. It's because of this myth of this perfect preservation of the Quran. And that does a huge disservice to really the Quran and to the study of the Quran. What does all of this show us, ladies and gentlemen? It shows us Christians have nothing to hide. We acknowledge textual criticism. We acknowledge that there may be variants in the text. In 1611, when the King James translation was first being translated, even the translators of the KJV, the King James Version, had a critical apparatus of on the side. They would have some manuscripts say this, some manuscripts say that. The same applies to the Hebrew Bible.
Tony, you got the question. You got the question. If you could just break down apparatus a little more, because Breakfast Gun just said, "What is an apparatus?"
The apparatus is basically it's a breakdown of an apparatus is a breakdown of a certain reading that you have in the New Testament, for example. that may appear in another manuscript, or it may be absent in another manuscript, or it may have a longer reading. What an apparatus does is it shows you all the manuscripts where this reading is absent or where this reading has been expanded upon. So think of an apparatus like a legend. You look at a map and you look at the legend, and it gives you the color code for the roads and so forth. So think of it as a legend. That's what we mean by an apparatus. And the Hebrew Bible also has, there's a critical apparatus of the Hebrew Bible as well, of the Masoretic text. So all of this to say, David, that from the get-go, even manuscripts, ancient manuscripts we have of the Greek New Testament, scribes would put little notes on the side, and they would make these notations. In other words, we have been honest and open about our scriptures. We have nothing to hide. The question is, why is it that the Quran has yet to see one critical apparatus? And so hopefully, with the work of Corpus Quranium, David, hopefully we're going to see one of these.
Mm-hmm. And not only do you have the Greek editions where they will give you textual variants and tell you which textual variants are found in which manuscripts and so on. Any good study Bible that you get, and many just modern translations. If you get an NASB, you look down at the bottom, it gives you textual variants down at the bottom. It'll say some manuscripts have this variation. And so notice, ladies and gentlemen, so what we're saying is you can go into any Christian bookstore and learn about textual variants and the history of the manuscripts of the Bible, right? We could have, if someone had wanted to at some point, we could have, gotten together and said, announced this plan and said, everyone send in your Bibles and we're going to burn them all. It wouldn't have worked out, but we could have tried that, could have said, hey, we're going to burn all Bibles except one, and then we'll say we have no differences. It's never occurred to any Christian to want to do that, right? That would be regarded as horrible and deceptive to just get unity by just burning all the evidence, right? In Islam, what do? Well, we got all these variants. Should we be honest about it? Should we discuss those variants? Should we try to figure out who's right when Ibn Masud says there's only 111 chapters and Ubay ibn Ka'b says there's 116 chapters and Zayd ibn Thabit says there's 114 chapters? Should we try and get to the bottom of this? No. Zayd, you decide, burn everything else. And then we'll pretend that we have complete unity and that Allah has miraculously preserved our book. And so what Tony is pointing out, to this day, you go into Muslim bookstores, you're not going to find anything about textual variants, right? You're not going to find the critical edition of the Quran that gives you all the different manuscripts and all the different variants, right? They just don't put that, they don't make it available for you to walk into a bookstore and buy that sort of thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, if this is all I knew about these two religions, if I didn't know anything else about evidence, if all I knew was that the leaders and scholars of this religion are upfront and honest about the evidence, and they actually try to deal with facts and evidence, and they don't try to destroy it. They try to deal with the evidence and explain things. And the followers of the other religions, they burn all the evidence, and they lie to people, and they deceive people, and they never try to deal with the evidence. I would have to decide with the religion that produces honest people, right? Which produces honest scholars and doesn't produce scholars who constantly have to lie to the people to keep them nice and comforted, right? Anything else before we go on to that clip?
No, I think that's pretty straightforward, David.
All right, I did want to take one comment real quick. Flies Mass said, David, how can the viewers help you and stop YouTube censorship? Surely we can complain too, right? Well, yeah, it's YouTube actually makes it really hard to complain to them, right? There's almost no way to contact YouTube. You can contact at Team YouTube, not just at YouTube. That doesn't, they don't read that. But there's at Team YouTube where they actually respond to questions. So far, the people who've asked them about censoring certain things haven't responded. So that YouTube just hasn't responded. But at Team YouTube is where you can go to ask questions about their censorship. As far as helping me, just it's pretty straightforward. When I post a video that you like, hit the like button, share it wherever you can, comment on it. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, click the bell. Those are the things that help that help videos. That sends a message to the algorithm to share this video, and hopefully before I get shut down, we become big enough to where if we need to, we can do something else really quick like. So yeah, helping the Helping my channel is basically the same way you'd help anyone's YouTube channel. Just like videos, watch videos, share videos, things like that. All right, let's go ahead and finish out this clip. I'll probably back it up a little. I'll probably, when I start playing the video, I'll probably rewind it slightly so that we don't miss anything on what Sheikh Yasir Qadhi is talking about here.
Very well-known issues of academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, you know, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new. They'll bring you riwayat, and they'll bring you athar, and then you add to that very well-known issues of, I don't even want to be explicit. And then you bring on top of that makhtutat, and then. And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. These are now well known within the Western Academy, that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be, 100 years ago. What is happening in the last few years is not me anymore. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream. And by and large, our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And they're not answering those questions in a manner that it needs to be answered.
Wow, wow, wow.
Wow.
Did you
Wowzers.
Did you catch that? What are your thoughts, Tony?
Yeah, well, I wrote this down, David. I love what he said there. The standard narrative has holes in it.
The standard narrative. Perfect preservation right down the left.
Holes in it. Yeah, the whole narrative, the standard narrative, it's been preserved since the time of Muhammad, and Gabriel came and went over it again with him. It has holes in it. Here it is, Dr. Yasir Qadhi, not a Christian, not a Jew, a Muslim, admitting what David and I have been admitting, at least I've been admitting, for the past 30 years. And now he says we can't hide anymore. It's out in the open, and Western scholarship essentially has pinned us to the wall.
Mm-hmm. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, Sheikh Yasir Qadhi acknowledges that the criticism has to come from without. It has to be Western scholars. And he says Western scholars are showing us the holes in our story of perfect preservation, our story that, oh, we know what the ahruf are, it's just different dialects, or it's just different pronunciations. And the Western scholars who don't have this reverence for the Quran that we have, to where they won't really question it, they're pushing against our explanations. And I like earlier when he said that we know these things are true, right? We know these things are true. We know that what they're saying, he said, we know that what they're saying is true. Because they're quoting our sources. We know that they're right. Yeah. We know that they're right when they're pointing out all the holes in our narrative. And so, but then again, well, I don't want to go into these. Why? Because Yasir Qadhi understands, hey, this is going to shake the faith of some Muslims. And Muslims just aren't ready for it yet. Why? Because every Muslim you run into, perfect preservation right down to the letter, and it's a miracle. Guys, these are fun times to be an apologist. Aren't these fun times? Oh, yeah. You're talking
it was worth the wait, David. It was worth the wait.
14 centuries of deception, starting not just with the deception of Muhammad, but mainly starting with Uthman burning all the manuscripts. That idea that in our religion we're going to cover up the evidence instead of being open and honest and trying to deal with the reality. 14 centuries of that, ladies and gentlemen. For 14 centuries, and now, more recently, Muslims have just been inundated with this claim. Perfect preservation, right down to the letter. It's a miracle. It's one of our main evidences for the miracle of Islam. And now even your own guys are being forced to admit, no, we're sorry. Wow. What a religion, man. What a religion.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take one or two questions before we go on to the clip from Shabir Ally, video from Shabir Ally, where he's gonna share his insights on this. Sly here says, where can we find a good Christian apologist course? This has been very interesting and eye-opening. Thanks for bringing the truth to us. God bless you both. Sly, I'm not sure if you're talking about like like a college level course, or just like an apologetics course from like a Christian ministry. But lots of the Christian ministries do apologetics courses. Like there are some with, I think Stand to Reason has one. I think Cross Examined has one. So if you go to some of the main Christian ministries, a lot of those will have apologetics programs. If you wanted to do something at a school, then Biola has an online Christian apologetics program, and you can do it for credit, or you can do it where it's like a certificate program to show that you've gone through all the talks and done the work and so on. I believe Houston Baptist has one as well. So yeah, just look around for apologetics courses. Are you familiar with any?
I know Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, I think, also has a course on Islam. I'm actually teaching a course on Islam this fall at the Toronto Baptist Seminary, and I think we may be going online. So if you want to hook up with Toronto Baptist Seminary, it'll be much cheaper because the Canadian dollar has been taking a pounding since our Prime Minister has been in charge of things. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested, you can always put it on the comment section. I can connect with you if you're interested. But I think they might be offering it online as well.
Yep, and a lot of people are commenting on the standard narrative. So Sheikh Yasser Qadi says the standard narrative has holes in it. A lot of people are drawing attention to the standard narrative. Tony, where did Muslims get the standard narrative from?
Yeah, from their teachers, from their imams. Their imams are simply saying it over and over. There's a saying, David, that Joseph Goebbels, one of the minister of propaganda for the Nazi National Socialist Party, said. He said, if you keep saying something over and over again, eventually people will believe it. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. You just got to repeat the same thing, the same myth over and over, and eventually people will just believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's what we've had. And I mean, the shocking thing is that I mean, any Muslim along the way, especially once we had the internet, especially once it's I understand it's different. You're in a village in Pakistan 40, 50 years ago. Yeah. If you can't read, or you don't even have access to the books, there is no internet, and your leader tells you something, I understand not knowing. But now, even in the age of the internet, Muslim leaders are saying perfect preservation right down to the letter, and it's a miracle. And any Muslim could do literally 5 minutes of research. You could do 5 minutes of research, and that's all you would need to do to know that this is a false claim, and they won't even do the 5 minutes of research. Tony, you actually, let's see. Oh, you froze on my screen for some reason. Are you still there, Tony?
I'm still here.
Okay, you're breaking up a little.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I'm gonna go ahead. I'll go ahead and start playing the Shabir clip. So our next clip, I'll go ahead and start playing the Shabir clip, and maybe you can hang up and call me back, and we'll see if that fixes the problem. All right, everyone, we are going to move on to a clip from Shabir Ally on the Sanaa Manuscripts.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and the mercy and blessings of God be with all of you. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally. In this segment for Let the Quran Speak, I want to continue my discussion on manuscripts and readings of the Quran. So in a previous segment, I gave you an overview of this issue, and now I'd like to go into it in some more detail. Recently, a manuscript has been discovered from Sanaa in Yemen, and it's referred to as the Sanaa Manuscript. That manuscript has 2 layers of Quranic writing. The lower layer has been scraped off, and the upper layer has the Quranic text written over. Now, the upper layer text quite closely corresponds to what Muslims are reading in the world today as the text of the Quran. The lower text that has been scraped off has some variation from what Muslims are reading in today's text. But those variations are not of any great significant degree that affects what Muslims believe or that affects Muslim practice in any significant way. So how do we explain this difference, and why was that Quranic manuscript scraped off?
I'm having a little problem getting Tony back. We got a bad connection. Sometimes these things are temporary, so I'll just keep the Skype window open here, and I'll try calling him back again once I go back to this clip. Did everyone catch what Shabir said there? He's talking about, he's acknowledging that there are differences in the Quran. We've already seen from the other clips that we watched in the discussion with Hatun Tash that he acknowledges there are differences in the manuscripts. He acknowledges that there are different versions of the Quran in the world today, and that there were differences back then in that Uthman had to burn, to get rid of. And but what he points out, and I find very interesting, is that these differences don't affect Islam in any major way. They don't affect core Islamic belief or practice. And why that's interesting is that's what Christians have been saying for years when Muslims point out, oh, there are textual variants in the history of the Bible. There are textual variants in the history of the Bible. And we say, yeah, but, of course, anytime you have a book that's copied by human beings over a period, over centuries, people are going to make copyist mistakes. You're going to have people making mistakes and so on. So you're going to have textual variants. And Muslims say, nope, God didn't perfectly preserve your book, then it doesn't work. We say, but it doesn't affect any major Christian doctrine. It doesn't affect any core Christian practice. You get the same Christianity. You don't find a manuscript where Jesus didn't rise from the dead. You don't find a manuscript where Jesus isn't the divine Son of God. You never find that sort of thing. And they say, too bad, any difference anywhere in the manuscript tradition shows that God's not protecting your book and it's not the word of God. And now, now the new position of Islam is, yes, there are all kinds of differences in the manuscript tradition. Yes, there are different versions of the Quran. Yes, there are all these problems. We had to burn them all. But it doesn't affect any core Islamic doctrine or practice. So it's not really that relevant. Well, guys, you're the ones who came up with your definition of corruption. Your definition of corruption was any variant anywhere. That was your definition of corruption. So now you can't suddenly change that. You can't suddenly say, oh, well, yeah, for decades we've been saying that your Bible's corrupt because it has textual variants, but now with our book, and we have textual variants, it's not corruption anymore. Can't do it. You're stuck with it. So sorry, your book has been corrupted. All right, I actually want to play that clip over from Shabir Ally to catch that, and I'll try and ring Tony again.
Now, it turns out that in Assalamu alaikum, peace and the mercy and blessings of God be with all of you. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally. In this segment for Let the Quran Speak, I want to continue my discussion on manuscripts and readings of the Quran. So in a previous segment, I gave you an overview of this issue, and now I'd like to go into it in some more detail. Recently, a manuscript has been discovered from Sanaa in Yemen, and it's referred to as the Sanaa Manuscript. That manuscript has two layers of Quranic writing. The lower layer has been scraped off, and the upper layer has the Quranic text written over. Now, the upper layer text quite closely corresponds to what Muslims are reading in the world today as the text of the Quran. The lower text that has been scraped off has some variation from what Muslims are reading in today's text. But those variations are not of any great significant degree that affects what Muslims believe or that affects Muslim practice in any significant way. So how do we explain this difference, and why was that Quranic manuscript scraped off? Now,
see me, David?
Nope, can't see you, but I can actually hear you. Go ahead and talk.
Oh, how about now? Can you see me?
Yeah, I see you now.
Okay. I don't know what happened to my iPad. It's like it's just hanging.
What happened is there are always tech problems. That's just how it works, right? I mean, you're on Skype, so we have a Skype connection. Then I have a connection with YouTube, and there are always internet fluctuations, especially in Canada, which is the most technologically backwards place in the entire world.
Yeah. Okay. I can just hold my phone.
So
like
guess
this.
what? Guess what happens? Happens. Glad to have you back. All right. Now, I don't know if you were able to hear what Shabir was saying there. in that clip. But he's talking about first. What's a palimpsest?
Yeah, a palimpsest is a parchment that has been written and then erased and written over it. Mm-hmm. So think of when we were in, I guess, elementary school, and we were writing in our notebooks, and we used pencils and erasers. Mm-hmm. And then remember, we'd make a mistake, and we would just vigorously erase what we had written. We made an error, we erase it, mm-hmm. and then rewrite over it. But if you look very closely, you could still make out the undertext, the text that was originally written. And so a palimpsest is basically a parchment. This was very common in the ancient world. We have biblical palimpsests as well, that is manuscripts of the Bible that were palimpsests. So basically it is a parchment that has been erased and then has been written over. Mm-hmm. And so the Sanaa manuscript, it was discovered in 1972, as I think Shabir mentioned, and it was never known or detected to be a palimpsest until 1981. So about 10 years later. And that's because of ultraviolet rays and light that are used in ancient documents. That's how they were able to discern there was an undertext or a lower text.
Yeah, guys, just so you understand, and Tony, there are Bible palimpsests as well, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something that Daniel Wallace has been working on for years. So guys, just understand, right? Basically, in the ancient world, it's not like now where you go to Walmart and you get a big pack of paper and you have all the writing material you want, right? It's you wanted writing material before the invention of relatively modern paper. Kind of difficult. So before parchment, they tended to use papyrus. That didn't last terribly long. Parchment lasted longer. So parchment is animal skins. So they treat animal skins to where you can write on them, and then that will last a very long time. But if you have an animal skin, and you write on that animal skin, and later you decide that there's something wrong with the manuscript there, or if it just becomes faded and you decide that you have to, you want to, it becomes faded, so you want to rewrite it or something like that. You don't just throw away. You don't want to throw away your parchment. It's very, very expensive, very difficult to come by. So you just wash it off or scrape it off, and then you'd write over it. And once you've let me get Tony back here. Once you've you're good. Seems like we got just some tech problems today. So no problem. It happens. Once you've sort of written over it, once you've washed it off or scraped it off or something like that, and then you write over it, well, eventually, how can people tell? How can people tell that there's this other version down there? Well, there's still slight indentations on the page, right? And so, as Tony pointed out, they use these very awesome ultraviolet cameras that photograph these indentations, and then people have to kind of go page by page and say, okay, we see the indentations for this letter, we see the indentations for this letter, and they can put together everything that was written on that earlier manuscript that was washed off or scraped off. And so they did that with this Quran manuscript that was discovered inside a wall. And so they just treated it as a manuscript for a while until they realized actually there's an older manuscript underneath that. There's an older manuscript that's underneath that. And so they took pictures with these ultraviolet cameras, put it together, and they discovered a Quran that has some differences. It's different from the Quran. The chapters aren't arranged the same. There are differences in the verses, all kinds of differences, definitely not perfect preservation right down to the letter. And what's interesting is that this is a very, very early manuscript, right? This is 7th century. This is a 7th century manuscript. So this is a very early manuscript. And it's thought that this is a manuscript that sort of predates, or at least it comes from at least it was copied. Either it predates the Uthmanic recension, or it is a copy of something like that. But basically, We have something before the Quran was standardized by Uthman and everything burned. We have something like that. So notice what could have happened here is, instead of burning this parchment, someone could have said, "Oh, I'm not burning this. Parchment's too expensive. Let's just wash off my version of the Quran so that we can put the newer official version of the Quran on there, and then I'll be okay. Then I'll be okay with my new Quran." Not realizing that little over 13 centuries later, people are going to find that manuscript, and they're actually going to discover what's written beneath and realize, wait a minute, there are all these problems here. We got some problems here. So that's basically the gist of that manuscript. And let's go back to Shabir and see what he's going to share with us on this, because Shabir is going to explain it for us.
It turns out that in Muslim classical literature, Muslim scholars have detailed that some companions of the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, recited the Quran in a way that varies from what commonly came to be recited by Muslims worldwide. Why this sort of difference? It seems to me, in putting all of the information and facts together, that the following transpired. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received the revelation initially, the main impetus at the moment was for people to absorb the message and to know the instructions and put them into practice. It did not matter at that stage so much that the exact words of the Quran had to be relayed from one person to another. So one person could tell his neighbor, you know what, I was with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, today, and a new piece of revelation came down, and basically it says that we are to do A, or do B, or do C, or these are the instructions. Now, the instructions do not have to be conveyed in the precise wording in order for the instructions to be understood and for them to be carried out. And so we can well understand that the initial messages delivered by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, might have been rephrased by some of his companions as they transmitted that information from one person to another. Now, eventually, scholars would become interested in knowing the precise wording, especially after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had passed away. And therefore, we can see that attempts were being made to compile the Quran with the exact wording, especially in writing. So Umar bin al-Khattab suggested to the first caliph of Islam, Abu Bakr, that he should commission a writing to be done. And so one of the close companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Zayd bin Thabit, who himself had memorized the entire Quran, was now given instructions to go around to all of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who had written pieces of the revelation on a wide variety of materials, to collect all of those pieces, to transcribe them onto sheets so that we could have a complete copy. And that copy was kept with the Caliph Abu Bakr, and then eventually the Caliph Uthman, the third Caliph of Islam, and this is within 14 to 24 years after the death of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he recalled that copy. He had further copies transcribed from it and sent to various parts of the Muslim empire after a double-checking effort was done by a committee, not only of Zayd bin Thabit, the one who initially conducted this search and find and compilation, but also by other persons in the committee, 3 other persons. Then those copies having...
All right. So still having a little trouble getting Tony back. And if we can't get Tony back, this might just... I've noticed this happens sometimes. Sometimes there's just bad internet in an area due to a bunch of people watching a bunch of stuff on Netflix on some particular night or something like that. It's happened on this channel many times over the years. But if we can't get Tony back, I'll probably hold off on the Shabir stuff and just take some questions, and then maybe we'll revisit it because usually there's not a problem with Tony's internet. But yeah, happens with him. Happens with almost everyone we've had on here. So notice Shabir's theory here. Interesting theory. but at least I don't agree with Shabir's theory, but I really, really like the fact that he's at least trying. He's at least trying to deal with the evidence. And I really think of Shabir's theory here. I really think of Shabir's theory here along the same lines as what Sheikh Yasser Qadhi was saying. Sheikh Yasser Qadhi was saying, we push a little bit, and then we accept an explanation, but the Western scholars are not going to accept that explanation. They're not going to be so generous. They're going to keep pushing on it. And they're going to point out problems. We're going to realize that our answer doesn't really solve the problem, and they're right. And so what Shabir is doing, I think that what Shabir is doing right now, it actually falls into what Yasser Qadhi was saying, that Shabir's pushing a little bit, but he's pushing a little bit on the claim that the Quran has been perfectly preserved, because he's acknowledging that it hasn't, that they do have differences, that they do have manuscript differences. And so he's saying, I'm pushing a little bit, and here's my explanation. And that explanation is meant to comfort Muslims who are finding out that the Quran has not been perfectly preserved. Muslims are finding out that the Quran has not been perfectly preserved, and what do we do about it? And Shabir says, it's not really a problem. It's not really a problem, because there were these early Muslims, and it wasn't really important at that stage of Islam to memorize the Quran word for word, syllable for syllable. No, you just had to get the basic teaching down. So these people copied their basic teachings down, and then they went around spreading that. And that's why you ended up with, that's why Uthman had to burn all these things, because they were made by people who didn't try to get the exact wording down. And because of that, they ended up with some Qurans that weren't nearly as perfect as Zayd ibn Thabit's. And so it seems like Shabir's explanation, and it seems like precisely the sort of explanation Yasser Qadhi is talking about when he says, we push a little and then we just accept the explanation. Not realizing that Westerners, non-Muslims, who are not simply going to take the first explanation that comes along, are going to push a little bit harder. And one of the first things that's going to pop up is, what do you do with Ubay ibn Ka'b? What do you do with Ibn Masud? What do you do with Muhammad's top reciters of the Quran who had objections to your new version of the Quran? What do you do with that, Shabir? You can't say, these were just, people who learned the gist of the Quran and then wrote their own Qurans based on that. You can't say that. You can't say that with these guys. These are the best. They're the best of the best. So if the best of the best had a problem with the Quran that you have today, you just got a problem there. And Shabir's answer isn't really going to solve that problem. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that's just Shabir's just going to fall into that problem. All right, let's watch a little more of this Shabir clip. And again, if Tony's just having problems, we'll take a few questions from the chat, and then we'll go through this clip later, because this is really an important clip and I want people to have it. By the way, the video that, if you weren't here when I mentioned the video clip that we watched from Yasser Qadhi, that's actually a video posted by Islam Critique. So if you go to Islam Critique's channel, the video is there. I also put a link to Islam Critique's video in the description box. All right, let's watch a little bit more from Shabir Ally, and then if we can't get Tony back by then we'll take some questions and we'll revisit the rest. We'll save the rest of the video for another live stream. Here we go.
It were sent to the various parts of the Muslim Empire so that we have a standard copy, which was then copied further and used and disseminated. So how do we get then a palimpsest, for that's what it is called, a copy of the Quran that has been erased so that another copy is written over it? Well, it's precisely because it is mentioned that when Uthman radiallahu anh commissioned new copies of the Quran to be made, he instructed that if anyone had copies that varied from this official version, then those copies should be erased, washed off, or scraped off, or sometimes the narratives say even burnt. That was in order to preserve the official copy, which was done not by one individual, but by a committee of persons who lived with and walked with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who knew exactly what the revelation was. However, nowadays, when non-Muslims hear that, you guys destroyed some copies of the Quran, now they're curious. Academic scholars, on the one hand, are quite curious for their own reasons. They want to know the nitty-gritty, down to the very letter. How was every word pronounced? What are the implications of those words? Did it mean something different? They want to trace the history and origins of things. Did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, teach a different religion? And did that religion evolve over time, as, for example, with the religion of other preachers and heroes and founders of religions? Did Islam become something different from what the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, envisioned? Is Islam...
So Shabir's bringing up how this looks suspicious to this treatment of the Quran looks suspicious to non-Muslims, and he's absolutely correct. But Shabir's going to push a little bit, and he is going to give an explanation that will maybe comfort his followers for a little while, but we're going to keep pushing, right? And it's not just going to be academics at conferences, it's going to be us pushing online. All right, we're going to go ahead and save that. I'm gonna go ahead and leave Skype open, and just in case Tony's internet just magically fixes, but he's telling me his internet's just having problems tonight. And again, that happens. It's happened for me many times. In fact, I made sure to get the to move to an area where I could get top of the line, tricked out internet, and even now I still have some problems. But for those of you who were watching back in the day, back in New York, it was back in the Bronx, it was a disaster. It's just some nights you log on and it's buffering every 10 or 20 seconds. But I'll go ahead and take a I basically don't want to just go through that video myself, so Tony and I will revisit it on a different night. And usually, for some reason, it's just particular nights when there's bad internet, a new series premiering or something like that. All right, so let's go ahead and take a couple questions here, and we'll probably close out here in a few minutes. Tom Jones says, David, how's your brother Manny? And any plans to have Jay Smith on? Yes, I'd like to have Jay Smith on. I just always forget to ask him. I'd actually like to get Jay Smith on one day, and then get Jay Smith and Hatun on at the same time. I think that would be a fun time. Maybe they can share some stories. As far as my brother Manny, he's been in what's he in? Is it a physical rehab place? But he has to leave here in, I think, a month. I believe he gets out. I mean, I think they actually tell him he's got another month, and then he has to. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. And I think he is going to be released in a month. And my other brother, I have 4 brothers and a sister, and my brother Matt said he's going to. Manny's gonna come live with my brother Matt at the beginning, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Hey Tony, we see you. We don't know how long. Could be 5 seconds. Could be 5 seconds. Could be 5 minutes. Could be 30 minutes. We don't know.
This is Canadian internet.
You got to get out of Canada, man.
Yeah, I know. It seems like someone does not like what we're talking about tonight, David.
No, I think
for whatever reason,
it is just tech stuff, and just because I've been, sometimes I live stream almost every night and stuff, and I just noticed there are tech problems, especially when there's all these different connections.
Right.
All these different connections.
What did I miss? Did I miss anything exciting?
We were talking about Shabir.
Okay.
Wait, so all of a sudden your internet started working again?
I had to turn my router off and put it back on again. So I just rebooted it.
I have to do that sometimes if I'm having especially bad internet day or something like that, I will reset. Yeah. I'll reset everything right before the live stream starts, just to
right. Good idea.
Just to make sure. All right. Well, Tony, it's already 9:37 here, so I'm thinking we'll just revisit that video on a different night and then start it over, because it's massively important. It's massively important to look at Shabir's explanation. But by the way, what do you think about Shabir's theory that? So ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in, you didn't see the last live stream. He has kind of a three-pronged explanation for why we have different versions of the Quran. One is you have the ahruf, and Shabir acknowledges there are disagreements about what that even means. But since the Quran is revealed, in these, he says it might be dialects or something like that, but that could account for some differences. Second, he says that during the early stages of Islam, getting the exact wording wasn't very important. What was important is getting the main teaching, and so people can memorize it in whatever way they want as long as they get the basic teaching. But then eventually some of them started putting those into manuscript form, their sort of altered versions, and that's why Uthman had to burn them. But then even after Uthman burns all the alternatives and puts out his standardized text, it didn't include the diacritical marks and so on. And so some of these words can mean different things depending on where you put those dots. And so that's his explanation for how we ended up with different Quran versions. Before we just start taking some questions here, Tony,
sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it still doesn't answer the question. What was the true reading? So he almost makes it sound like there are some Muslims giving us a dynamic equivalence, like the NIV version of the Quran, but it still doesn't answer the question: what was the true reading? And then when he says, well, all Uthman wanted to do was simply give us a Quran that everyone could agree on and so forth, but he doesn't mention the fact that the Quran that Uthman used, the standardized text that he used, was a standardized text by Zayd bin Thabit. Mm-hmm. And Ibn Masud did not have some nice things to say about that, because he said, I was reciting the Quran when Zayd bin Thabit was still a little kid playing in the street. Mm-hmm. And so the problem here is that from the get-go, the Sahaba, the companions of Muhammad, Ibn Masud, Ubay bin Ka'b, remember Ubay bin Ka'b is the guy that he said Muhammad called him the master reciter of the Quran. They didn't go to any of those companions. They took this guy by the name of Zayd bin Thabit. And then he never explains the fact that when Uthman burned all these things, he makes it sound like, well, in those days, they didn't have museums and they weren't interested in putting these in museums. But that still doesn't answer the question. If I believe that this is the word of God, that this is the speech, the eternal speech of Allah on paper, why would you burn that? Mm-hmm. Right? And think of, for example, the Jews. Like, the Jews revered the scriptures so much that they would never burn their scriptures or drown them. What they would do is they would place them in repositories called genizas. And there's a famous one in Egypt, the Cairo Geniza. And when archaeologists discovered this, what they noticed was they had worn out scrolls placed in the Geniza. It was like a mausoleum, if you will. They placed them there because they did not believe they could destroy them, because they had the name of God, the Tetragrammaton was written on them. So notice how the Jews revered their scriptures. How did they do it? By storing them away. Same with Christians. That's why we have so many manuscripts. But it's very telling that a Muslim caliph like Uthman would go out and destroy what was believed to be the word of God. So I think Shabir does address some of the issues, but I think he's really sugarcoating the account of Uthman.
Yeah, and the question would be, does he realize it?
I think he does.
Yeah, that's the sad part. So you have to respect him for coming out and acknowledging the things that he does, but gosh, he has to know that Shabir is a really, really smart guy. So he has to see, basically, as Yasser Qadi would put it, that there are holes in the narrative, right? Even in Shabir's narrative, where he's trying to take account, he's trying to take into account the different versions that we have today, the burning of manuscripts, the traditions about different, different things in the different manuscripts, the disputes and everything. He's trying to account for that, but he has to realize that even this doesn't work. And so notice they're going to end up with the same problem. So in other words, if everyone then comes to accept this, right? In other words, if Muslims around the world all of a sudden said, okay, our guys lied to us about the perfectly preserved Quran. They lied to us about that. But now we've got this other claim that here's how the history of the Quran went. And yes, there are different versions. Yes, we had to burn up all these things, but here's the reason why. Well, if you're given a bad explanation here that we could just refute, it doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. You have to be honest with the evidence, and the honest explanation is it's just a huge, massive mess, right? You get the feeling that that's what Yasser Qadi wanted to say when he's going, "This is no joke," right? It seems like and he's talking about them not even knowing what the ahruf are. It seems like he wants to say, guys, it's just a huge mess. It's just a huge disaster. And that's why people told you perfect preservation right down to the letter, to try and shield you from reality. One point I did want to draw, and I mentioned this. I think you were off at this point, but I wanted to point out that for years, because you've been dealing with this as well, for years, when Muslims said your Bible's been corrupted, and we said no, well, I mean, you have textual variants and so on, but that's to be expected when people are writing scriptures by hand over a period of centuries in completely different parts of the world. You would expect there to be all kinds of textual variants. But since we preserve our manuscripts, we can usually get back to the original reading. And what we pointed out was, nowhere do you ever get to a textual variant that affects Christian doctrine in any significant way, or affects Christian practice in any significant way. And we said that, and Muslims said, nope, too bad. If you have any textual variants, it's been corrupted. It's been corrupted. And now we've seen Shabir saying, yeah, we have the textual variants. Yeah, Uthman had to burn a bunch of stuff. Yeah, we've got different versions today, but it's not something that affects any core Islamic doctrine or practice. What do you think about the level of hypocrisy here?
Oh, it's high level, because it's the same argument that Christians have been making for centuries. Even Bart Ehrman openly admits, and he's no friend of Christianity, Bart Ehrman, their favorite scholar, said none of these variants affect any of the cardinal teachings of the Christian faith. So we've been saying this for centuries now. And Muslims were saying, not good enough, unless you have a perfectly preserved Bible, not good enough. And now they're saying exactly the same things. And you know what, David? That's what Shabir told me back in '94. That's exactly the same thing he told me. It doesn't affect any of the cardinal teachings of Islam. And so we've known about this, but only now they're coming out, because you can't hide it anymore. And we've already talked about this, that it's widely available on the internet. You could research it for yourself. So the question now is this, David. So now what are our Muslim friends going to do? So now we have two manuscript traditions, which we've always claimed, like you rightly said, David. We believe that the original scriptures, I mean, I believe that the original authors' autographs were inerrant, but the scribes who copied those original copies were not inerrant. In other words, the Bible never says that those who would copy, the apostles or the prophets, whatever it may be, the Bible never says that the copyists are infallible. Only the original writers are. But we're able to reconstruct the text by looking at all of these manuscripts. So, and the way I put it is this way, David. Imagine if the Declaration of Independence, the original Declaration of Independence that the fathers of the United States wrote, let's say the original document was burned down in a fire. Would we be able to reconstruct the Declaration of Independence? Absolutely. Why? Because there's hundreds of thousands of copies of it. And even if there's a typo, we'd still be able, through the other copies, we'd be able to balance it, checks and balances. We'd be able to correct the variant and reconstruct the original. So because we have so many manuscripts, Bart Ehrman says we have copies of copies of copies, but because we have such a voluminous cache of manuscripts, it actually builds and boosts our confidence that we can reconstruct the text of the New Testament. Same with the Old Testament, with the Dead Sea Scrolls 1,000 years earlier from what we had in the Masoretic text. And as you know, David, the number of manuscripts in the Quran pales in comparison with what we have in the New Testament. So again, we both have the same textual transmission problems. Now what? Now we have to decide which of these two books comes from God and which of them are consistent with what we know about truth, history, archaeology. All of these things have to be brought into this discussion.
Yeah, guys, as Tony was just pointing out here, part of the we hear about all these textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the Bible. That's because we have thousands of manuscripts, right?
Right.
Notice if we took all the Greek manuscripts of the New Testament and we burned all of them but one, we would have zero textual variants. We'd say, there's one, there's only one. There's not a textual variant anywhere. Yeah, because we burned them all, right? The more handwritten copies of a book you have, the more variants you get, right? But notice the more copies you have, I mean, it's more work because you have a ton of copies that you have to read and compare and so on. But the the easier it is to actually get to the original reading, right? Because if I'm copying, as Tony pointed out, if I'm copying the Declaration of Independence, and Tony is, and Sam Shamoun is, and so on, if Sam Shamoun makes a mistake, a copyist error, because he's a big doofus and he's the worst typer in the world. Have you seen him? He types like this. He types with one finger. If Sam Shamoun makes an error, Tony and I don't make the same error. So you can look and say, okay, David's manuscript says this, Tony's manuscript says this, and Sam's says this. Sam's gets this different. Well, that's different from what David and Tony put, right? Now notice that's with 3 people. Even with 3 people, with 2 people it would be hard because if one person made a mistake, you wouldn't know who's right. If you have 3 people, then you end up in a scenario if one person makes a mistake, it's 2 against 1. If you have thousands, then you start to notice where changes creep in. And you compare that with the solution in Islam, which is let's burn all the evidence and cover it up. And man, that tells me a lot. That tells me a lot
David,
about the religion.
there's something else. There's something as well, and that is in Islam, like you mentioned earlier, you have a control center. You have the caliph who is over the empire, the Islamic empire, and he standardizes the text of the Quran. In the history of Christianity, that was not the case. I mean, in the first century, these Christians, they couldn't just run off to Kinko's or whatever it may be and make photocopies. They had to. That's what a manuscript is. It's the script written by hand. That's what manuscript means. They would make copies of these documents so that they can share them with their churches. There was no control center. That's why there's this widespread dissemination of these manuscripts. And that's why the whole conspiracy theory, David, the idea that Jews and Christians corrupted the scriptures, it's impossible because there was no checks and balances in the distribution of the manuscripts throughout the Mediterranean basin. And therefore, because there was no control center, we are able to look at these documents and we can understand why there's variance, why they confused one Greek letter for another, because some of them can be easily confused. And remember, there's a continuous text, right, David? It's called scriptio continua. It's a continuous script. And therefore, it's very easy, and we can see where scribes would make mistakes. So there's no control center in Christianity. There's nobody saying, hey, you know what? There's this Muhammad dude, and he's saying that he's prophesied in the scriptures. I want you all Jews, you go into your Bibles, eradicate his name off the book of Deuteronomy. Christians, take him out of John. That's not even possible. There's no control center. There's no control on the dissemination of the text. But not so with Islam. The caliph ran the show. And he standardized the Quran, and there was bloodshed too, David, and even Uthman suffered the consequences of this. So this was not an easy transition. People fought tooth and nail to accept the standard version of the Quran.
Always opportunities for clarification here. Amar Salah said, ex-Muslim here, what about the Bibles that were destroyed after the Council of Nicaea, which were very different from the ones we have now? For example, Judas Bible that was found in Egypt. Amar, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you need to get your information about the history of texts from somewhere other than the Da Vinci Code and some really, really horrible YouTube videos. You'd get more accurate information on Wikipedia than what you're saying here.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the Gospel of Judas, which is a 2nd century forgery. Everyone in the universe acknowledges it as a 2nd century forgery. If you read it, instead of just going, oh, there's a Judas Bible, if you read it, you would realize there's no way this nonsense. Well, we're going to have to do this, because I read the Gospel of Judas when it became this big thing, and I was like, what? What is this nonsense? It sounds like
science fiction.
It sounds like Scientology, right? It's talking about the pleroma of this and that. It's like all this esoteric nonsense that no one can even make sense of. This doesn't sound like the stories being told by 1st century fishermen and so on, right?
No.
Doesn't sound like it came from the 1st century. Sounds a lot like a bunch of Gnostic nonsense from the 2nd century. So notice, Amar, all you have to do when you hear someone go, oh, they kept the Gospel of Judas out of the Bible. The Gospel of Judas isn't in the Bible because it was a 2nd century forgery that no one in the history of humanity thought is an actual 1st century document. No one thinks that. There is not a scholar who thinks, oh, this goes back to Judas. We need to take this seriously. There's no one who believes that in the world. So that's one problem. And the other idea is, Tony, what about all the Bibles that were destroyed after the Council of Nicaea, which were very different than the ones we have now? And we know because we saw that in the Da Vinci Code movie.
Right. It's a joke, really. Yeah. Constantine is really, poor Constantine. The guy is always in the doghouse for everything. Yeah. Constantine had nothing to do with, for example, the Council of Nicaea. He was only there as a referee, as the emperor. He was basically there to maintain order. But this whole idea of these Bibles being burned, the Gospel of Judas, they didn't burn any Bibles at the Council of Nicaea.
They didn't even deal with that. Wasn't even an issue. It's not an issue.
It wasn't even an issue. It was Arius, the Arian heresy that denied the deity of Christ, and they dealt with the date of Easter. Should we celebrate Easter during the time of the Passover, or do we celebrate it after the first full moon of the spring equinox? That was it, and it had nothing to do with the canon at all. Yeah. And you're right, David. The Gospel of Judas was a 2nd century Gnostic text, like the Gospel of Thomas, like the Gospel of Mary, Gospel of Philip. These are all Gnostic texts. And because, number one, they were not written by the eyewitnesses, because they were all dead by the end of the 1st century. Judas hung himself, so I don't even know how he wrote a gospel. But if you go on, you'll realize that the document dates past the 1st century. It was not written by an apostle, because all the apostles were dead by the end of the 1st century. It was not in conformity with anything those early Christians believed. So the Gospel of Judas is like right what you said, David. It's like a 2nd century version of L. Ron Hubbard,
and
writing a gospel.
Yeah, I think it would be awesome just to do a show. I could do it myself. I'm looking around here to see if it's in this room or if it's on my other bookshelves. But yeah, I mean, all we would have to do is just read a couple of passages of this, and people would be giggling themselves silly.
Oh yeah.
And so, Amar, that's never been an issue, and we know everything that happened at the Council of Nicaea. As Tony was pointing out, we know the issues that were at the Council of Nicaea, and sadly, that particular council has just become anytime you want to blame anything on Christianity, just say that it came from the Council of Nicaea. That's it. Just insert it there. And the reason is, and this is something you need to get away from, Amar, as you say you're an ex-Muslim. This isn't just a problem for Muslims or for atheists or so on. There is a tendency, if you don't know about something, and you hear something from someone, for some reason, there's just no inclination to go and actually study it, right? Someone tells you, hey, this is what happened at the Council of Nicaea. How about going and looking up the Council of Nicaea and seeing what happened there? If someone tells you the Gospel of Judas, why not look into the Gospel of Judas a little bit, right? It's good. It's just a good habit to get into. And by the way, that's really how I ended up studying Islam a lot, because Nabil would tell me, oh, there's this scientific miracle, and Muhammad predicted the rise of modern transportation and so on. And I go, let me see it. Give me the source. Tell me where it is in your sources. I want to read it. And that is a good habit to get in. Show me that, right? But then at the Council of Nicaea, right after the Council of Nicaea, they burned all these. Show me that. Show me that from a reliable source, not from some crap YouTube video. You know what I mean? All right. All right, check this out. JJ says, okay, David Wood, I know I just heard Shabir Ally say the man remembered the entire Quran. So why would he give to you to collect it if he was the rememberer? Now, Tony, looks like what JJ's pointing out here is Shabir Ally in the video said that Zayd ibn Thabit had memorized the entire Quran. And so it looks like JJ is saying, why is he trying to go around collecting it if Zayd ibn Thabit remembered the entire thing? It actually gets worse than that, JJ. Zayd ibn Thabit said that when Abu Bakr gave him the task of collecting the Quran, he said, he might as well have told me to move a mountain from one place to another. This is so hard. This doesn't sound like a simple, easy process of, I've memorized the 114 chapters of the Quran in perfect Arabic, and so all I have to do is sit down and write them out. It sounds like he's thinking, no, we have a massive, horrible mess here. We've got all these people dying who had parts of the Quran memorized, and we've got these different versions of the Quran going around, and we've got these different ahruf, and we don't know what they are, and my goodness, how am I going to get to the bottom of this? That sounds like what he was saying there. And so this is an example of Shabir's explanation being meant to comfort Muslims who are finding out about the differences in the Quran, but it's not an explanation that's going to last very long. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, David. That's exactly what Zaid said. He thought, "Oh my heaven, this is a Herculean task to assemble the Quran. Why would you have to assemble it if it was already intact? If Gabriel came and went through the Quran with Muhammad, why was it such an arduous task to try to assemble it? Because all that we were told was it was on pieces of bone, on bark, on palm leaves and so forth, and to try to gather that, it was like trying to almost find needles in haystacks. So what we're being told here is not that, oh yeah, it's all been remembered. It was a very difficult, arduous task. But again, why would Zayd bin Thabit be chosen to do this when Ibn Masud was one of the companions of Muhammad? Remember what Muhammad called Ubay bin Ka'b, David? Remember he called him the Sayyidul Qura, which means the master of the Quran. If you want to learn the Quran from anyone, go to those four, but especially Ubay bin Ka'b. And I think Dr. Qadi mentions that as well, especially Ubay bin Ka'b. Why didn't they go with Ubay bin Ka'b's text or Ibn Masud? I think it's pretty obvious why there was obviously conflict between Uthman, Ibn Masud, and Ubay bin Ka'b. So the most reliable companions of the Prophet were basically, they were overruled by the caliph, and they went with the text of Zayd bin Thabit. So the story just sounds very sketchy right from the get-go.
Yeah, and you're mentioning Ubay bin Ka'b and Yasser Qadi. Yasser Qadi did talk about him, and even in Sahih al-Bukhari, we start to see some of the picture emerge. Umar said, Ubay was the best reciter among us, but we leave off some of what he recites. And Ubay replies, I learned it from the mouth of Muhammad. I'm not leaving it for anything whatsoever.
Correct.
So notice, this is Umar, one of Muhammad's closest companions, and the second of the rightly guided caliphs. Right. And Ubay ibn Ka'b, one of the top reciters of the Quran, and a man that Umar acknowledges is the best reciter of the Quran. And Ubay saying, I got this directly from the mouth of Muhammad. And Umar is saying, now we got to leave some of that off. This is amazing, right? This is amazing stuff here.
It is. And we get that from the Islamic sources. It's their own sources that tell us this. So read between the lines. There's something going on here. They don't like Ubay bin Ka'b's recension. And they definitely don't like Ibn Masud's recension as well.
They did not like Ibn Masud. And guys, this is so amazing here. By the time you get to, if you're not taking away anything else from tonight, take this away. By the time you get to Uthman, there are all these disputes going around. And Uthman says, in effect, I'm going with this guy, Zayd ibn Thabit. I'm going with this guy, Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd disagreed with Ubay on a ton of things. Zayd disagreed with Ibn Masud on a ton of things. Ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Ka'b didn't even have the same number of chapters in the Quran as Zayd ibn Thabit. They didn't even agree on that. And then if you go through the Quran, there were hundreds of differences just in Surah 2 alone. And so you look at this and you say, okay, well, maybe those guys were just wrong. The problem is Muhammad said, if you want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from 4 people. And 2 of the people on that list were Ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Ka'b. And Zayd ibn Thabit wasn't on there.
Right.
So you have to ask a question. Does Muhammad know which Quran is correct? Does he know who the best reciter of the Quran is? Because he put Ubay on his list. And Umar even acknowledged Ubay's the best. Well, guess what? Ubay doesn't agree with your Quran. So what do? Were Umar and Muhammad wrong? So this is a massive mess here. This is one big epic catastrophe. And I pointed out in the discussion with Hatun, Muslims talk about the miracle of the Quran. If there's a miracle here, it's that the Quran has all the characteristics and all the features of a book that was just a massive mess to be passed down to us, and somehow it's been perfectly preserved right down to the letter. Anyway, and that would be a miracle. If your book has all of the features of a book that was changed over and over and over again, and yet it's never been changed, that's a miracle. I agree. So if you Muslims who regard it as perfectly preserved in spite of all the evidence, yeah, I'd say you got a miracle on your hands. All right. Well, we've been going 2 hours now. Why don't we take I'll just read off some comments from the super chat, and then we'll go and close out. Bence says, love your work, David. Best wishes to you and your family from your northern neighbors, Canada. So that's one of your fellow Canadians. Is there any other name for Canadians?
Canucks.
Canucks.
They also refer to them
something
jokingly as Canucks. Yeah.
What is that? Does anyone know what that means?
I don't know, to be honest with you. It's probably some old Native American word. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Canada is also a Native American word or Aboriginal name. Yeah.
Buzz says, thank you, David and Anthony. Arlen 3 says, I just read about this in Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. Love this book from Nabil. So he's just reading about, and by the way,
right.
Just so everyone knows, Nabil said, Nabil later when he would share his story, and when he was talking to me, a lot of things started to bother him about the moral character of Muhammad, because he'd been taught that Muhammad was this perfect man. The ideal moral standard. So when he learned all kinds of things, and it was the Aisha issue didn't bother him very much, but the issue of being able to go out and just take your female captives and take them as sex slaves and then pass them on and sell them and so on like that bothered him. So there was that, but the other thing that really, really bothered him was the Quran. He'd been told his entire life that the Quran has been perfectly preserved right down to the letter and that it's a miracle. And then we started looking into it together and found out that is absolute nonsense. And that starts to shake his faith. And so Nabil is he's a microcosm, right? He's an example of what is going to take place in Islam as a whole, right? Nabil realized, wait a minute, I'm told all my life one thing from my leaders. I'm told one thing and it's completely false. Maybe I can't trust these guys to tell me the truth. Maybe I need to investigate this myself. And as soon as he started thinking that, he's on his way out of Islam, right? But that's true of the Muslim population as a whole. If we keep coming at them, showing them that their leaders have been lying to them for centuries, if we keep pushing this information, Yasser Qadi's acknowledging it. He's talking about like the scholarly level, the scholars pointing out your explanations don't make any sense. But there's the popular level. We have to deal with the popular level, right? We have to deal with the popular level, bringing this information to Muslims. But you're going to get the same thing. There's only so much you can take with the sources being put in your face about all these changes and showing that now even your own apologists are acknowledging that your book's been changed. There's only so much of that you can take before you realize, wait a minute, everything I've been told all my life by these guys is false. Maybe I need to look into this myself. And then once you look into it, once you're ready to, once that light switch is flipped on, and now you see your leaders, your scholars for what they are, deceivers, you're on your way out of Islam. Because there's at the end of the day, there's no real reason to believe in Islam. It's all based on lies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me go a couple more here. Cheryl R. didn't leave a comment, but in the super chat, Shooter Down Under. I'm unable to send you a question on this chat. You just posted a comment. How come you couldn't post a question? I'm confused. Prof. T.U. Smith said, David, praise God for your ministry. When is the Dr. Wood School of Apologetics coming? Well, we're kind of building that over time, but that's one of the first projects that's coming up, right? We're building a global apologetics education system. But yeah, we're focused on getting stuff available in other languages. Brian D says, my wife is an ex-Muslim. She says if a Muslim lies and ignores facts in order to protect Islam, is doing a favor to Allah, since Islam is a lie. So I think you're saying that she says that if you're a Muslim and you lie for the sake of Islam, you're actually doing a favor for Allah. I think that is how certain Muslim scholars and leaders view it, right? Like, hey, if the Muslim population knew the truth about this topic we're talking about, they're going to leave Islam. So in order to help Allah out here, we just have to lie. We just have to lie to the population. What are your thoughts on this, Tony?
Yeah, I think the passage we were talking about earlier about Allah being al-Makarin, the greatest of the deceivers, and why they plotted against you and Allah plotted against them. And that word plot there in Arabic can also mean it's the word for deception. And Ibn Kathir, as he comments on that text, remember what he says. He says that in certain situations, it's permissible to withhold truth from people. And then he quotes, was it Al-Darda, who says, we smile at you with our faces, but we hate you in our hearts. Yeah. And so there is a form of deception. Muhammad said war is deceit. And jihad is an act that all Muslims are engaged in, whether it's on the first level, second, third level. And sometimes that form of jihad includes deception. Muhammad, in fact, encouraged when someone said, should I go and lie to them so I can kill them? He said, yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. So, yes, your wife is absolutely right. The idea of using deception to forward Islam is perfectly all right. In fact, even things that are considered sinful in Islam, you can actually do them if your whole point is to engage in jihad. That is, if you're going to die in the way of Allah, it's okay to violate certain Islamic principles because of the doctrine of darura, which is the doctrine of necessity. If you remember, David, when the 9/11, some of the 9/11 pilots who flew their planes into the Twin Towers in New York City, the night before, they were out in a strip bar. Mm-hmm. Well, that's considered sinful in Islam, but you see, he knew he was going to die the next morning as a shaheed. And therefore, a jihad has all of his sins covered and atoned for by his death for Allah. So the idea of deception in the way of Allah, of course it's permissible because Allah plots, Allah deceives. And so if Allah does it, why wouldn't his followers do it as well?
Mm-hmm. And another sad state of affairs, but it's I really hope you Muslims who are watching and you get upset at us for sharing information with you, just for 5 minutes, sit back and think, wait a minute. My leaders keep telling me false things, and I love them for it. These guys keep telling me the truth, and I hate them for it. What does this say about me and my religion? That they've produced this sort of character. Someone who loves, lies, and hates facts and truth. Just sit back and think about that, because you shouldn't be getting mad at us when we quote your sources to you. You shouldn't be flipping out when we quote your sources to you. You should be getting mad at your leaders who lied to you about this. Tony, I've mentioned this before, but this situation, always Islam being propped up on lies, it always reminds me of when I was reading years ago about Alexander the Great. The Greeks were scared. The Greeks were scared of the Persians. When the Persians would invade, the Greeks could unite and defend themselves against the Persians. But the Greeks would never dream of actually going to taking the fight to the Persians. Actually going, they regarded it as this massive, powerful empire.
Right.
But during the time of Philip of Macedon, travelers started coming back from Persia and saying, guys, this empire that you think is really powerful, it's actually falling apart. Their forts are falling apart. Their soldiers are lying around drunk. A well-trained army could go in there and just wreak havoc. And that's kind of how I feel about the arguments that have been put forward by Muslim apologists over the years, that they've built Islam upon a foundation of deception. Islam seems really powerful. It seems huge. It seems unstoppable, but it's built on these pillars of lies. And so all you need is a well-trained group of Christian apologists, and not just Christians. If we're talking about showing that Islam is false, that's something atheists, Hindus, agnostics, everyone can have a part in. But Islam has propped itself up on a foundation of lies, and so they've opened themselves up. They've opened themselves up for what's about to happen. All right, Tony. Looks like we're losing you again a bit. You're frozen. Can we still hear you? Go ahead and say something.
Oh, I
All right, you are totally broken up, but that's fine, because this is a good time to cut out maybe a week from now or something like this. We'll revisit the issue, and maybe we'll look at a couple of clips. We'll revisit this clip from Shabir and finish the entire thing, and probably go through another Yasser Qadhi clips, because this is just an awesome time for Christian apologetics, that Muslim apologists are now admitting what we've been saying for years. And Muslims have been calling us liars for years, telling us that we're lying about these differences in the Quran, telling us that we're making all of this up, even telling us that we're printing fake versions of the Quran to pretend that there are differences in there. Muslims have been telling us this for years, and now their own scholars are coming out saying, guys, we've got some issues here we need to address. And so these are awesome times to deal in this area. And so we'll revisit that soon, and we'll go through this issue. Want to keep returning to this issue. I believe I'll be on tomorrow night with Shameless Sam Shamoun, and we'll just be doing a general Q&A, because we always notice that we cover a topic, but there are always questions on all kinds of issues. And so tomorrow night, unless something huge happens tomorrow and there's actually a topic we have to address, tomorrow we will just do Q&A. We'll just take questions the entire time. And someone asked to see my mug in the chat. That's Saitama. That's One Punch Man. And yep, it's just him saying okay. This was a gift when I was doing some recordings one day, and someone gave me that. And Tony, do I have your voice yet?
Sir.
Nope, your voice is still horrible, but that's fine. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, Tony will have to greet everyone next time. And nope, I won't have a video out tonight, but I will definitely have a video out tomorrow, and talk to you all again during the live stream tomorrow.